So shift 2, the technical challenges with OTT, connected TV. So we have a great panel here. We are missing one person. Tal Chalozan couldn't be with us today, CTO of Innovid, because his wife is having a baby, which is, an okay reason. So we're sorry to miss him. But we are very lucky to have Youssef Ben Youssef, the head of ad platform at Roku. He'll be our moderator. Lexie Pike, product marketing manager at Brightcove. Craig Berlingo, who is VP of product at Telaria and a Tech Lab board member. Thank you, Craig. And Tim Ware, executive director of advanced TV and programmatic demand at Sony Pictures. So varied perspectives here. Hopefully we'll get deeply into the technical side now after getting a really good cross-section of why all of this matters. So with that, thank you very much and welcome to our panel.
Thank you. How are you? Good morning, everyone. Hi, good morning. I understand the first two presentations were a little bit, we'll try to make this a little bit more positive, hopefully, even though we're talking about challenges. Every time we have challenges, there are opportunities, as Mark mentioned, so we'll talk about that. Thank you so much, the IAB, for inviting us and for this opportunity. Super important topics. Obviously, we're talking about OTT today. It's kind of like the sexiest topic of the year, but hopefully we'll try to talk about the actual challenges that different platforms and different entities in this ecosystem are trying to solve. So hopefully it would be beneficial to you. We'll try towards the end to keep a couple of minutes for questions. So if you can please hold those towards the end. Why don't we start with maybe a couple of introductions, and if you guys can tell us what are the main challenges, or what is the main challenge that you've been thinking about in 2018? Actually, Lexie, you can start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lexie Pike. I work at Brightcove. We're an online video platform, and we enable publishers to do everything from cloud-based encoding all the way to social distribution. I primarily focus on SSAI, or dynamic ad insertion, and I have a bit of an ad tech background, so that's why I'm here today. And what keeps me up at night, our biggest challenge is we have all this sophisticated technology. We have pacing algorithms, frequency capping, audience targeting, but still, my friends and family ask, why do I see the same ad over and over on my OTT device? So hopefully the IAB can solve all our problems with the universal ad ID and the IFA. So,
Craig?
I'm Craig Berlingo. I lead product for Telaria. We're a video management and monetization platform. The thing that I'm thinking about a lot in 2019, and since we launched, is how do we, as everyone cuts the cord, how do we keep the value of television as it goes digital? So from the user perspective, how can we make sure that everyone still has a great experience no matter how they're consuming video? From a publisher perspective, making sure that the value of that inventory translates over in digital, that there's not a decline. And then from an advertiser perspective, how can they make sure that they can reach their audience in a way that's a great experience?
Tim?
Tim Ware from Sony Pictures, and full transparency, worked with this gentleman here and many of you here. And our opportunity is how do we help our brand, our advertisers that Mark was speaking to, really navigate and leverage the workflow. I think there's a big opportunity and need by holding companies and big agencies, and right now it's incumbent upon all of us to help migrate the linear TV dollars so that they can target and measure and realize the opportunity and the full potential with all of you and many of you in the audience.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. So as you probably know, when we talk about connected TV and OTT, things get like really complicated quite fast. And we should not assume that like the workflow or the life cycle of an ad impression mimics the traditional, say, display ad for that matter. As Mark mentioned, there's a huge shift towards live TV. And when we talk about live streaming and trying to mimicking linear TV on OTT platforms, whether we're talking about publisher content streaming or the actual advertising serving, the workflow is quite complex. So Lexie, can you tell us a little bit how your company, the stream stitching kind of services actually help with that kind of provide a seamless service to the viewers at the end of the day?
Yeah, so using this diagram that you can see up there, we have two side-by-side comparisons. One is on the left is traditional client-side ad delivery, and on the right you have server-side ad delivery. So all the same components. You have an ad stream and a content stream, and somewhere in the middle you have ad decisioning. The difference between the two is where and when it's all being executed. So in client-based ad insertion, you're making a call every time there's an ad break, and during that call, there's a potential for buffering between when you switch between the video player and then the ad player. And this also allows for ad blockers to detect that client-side call to the ad server. In server-side ad insertion, you eliminate all that. The server-side ad vendor, which is Brightcove in this instance, will take both the content stream and the ad stream and stitch it together into one single file and deliver that to the player. So it creates a smooth broadcast-like experience, and it eliminates the potential for ad blockers to detect that call.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Craig, if we can shift gears a little bit, I know that we talked offline and through different events like this one about how can we together make the user experience and the viewer's experience on OTT platforms much, much better than it is today. Can you tell us a little bit what Telaria is doing? First of all, maybe what are the challenges, like the fact that we're seeing the same ad over and over again on certain publishers, and what are you working on in terms of standards and actual technology that you're pushing to the market?
Yeah. First I'll talk about how complicated an ad pod is and a commercial break, right? So, ultimately as a publisher, you have, let's say, 90 seconds to fill and monetize as best as you can. That 90 seconds could be one big long pharmaceutical ad. It could be 15 6-second ads. There's a lot of different ways you can go. The challenge is that there's also many business rules and user expectations as well as advertiser expectations within those 90 seconds. So for example, the user one I think or the viewer is really the most important thing, because you have a long-term relationship in video with your viewer. You want them to come back the next day. So if you see the same ad 3 times in a row, that's a really bad experience. If it's pixelated, if an advertiser used an ad that's meant for a phone and then it's 3 feet tall, that's not going to work. So there's a viewer expectation. Mark talked about if it's too loud compared to the content or doesn't match the quality. So that's one of the pieces. The second is, for a publisher, there are brand safety considerations. If you have a high quality show, you don't want to have an ad that doesn't match that. You may have sales channel conflict. You have a relationship with this advertiser, and you don't want them coming through a different channel. You may not want your competitors to run there. And then from an advertiser perspective, you also, you don't want the same ad to be shown 3 times in a row. You also don't want your ad to be shown next to your competitor's ad. So another business rule within that ad pod is, maybe category separation, where you don't have 3 auto ads in a row. And that makes it more valuable, which is good for the publisher and the advertiser. So now you're trying to put together this ad pod. You have all these business rules, which are not typically germane to digital, display ad tech, and now you have to communicate that to all of your demand partners, and that becomes really, really tricky. So, from our perspective, the very first thing we do with our publishers is try to understand what's important and what's not. What do they want to get across? Is this a pre-roll? Is it an ad pod? capture those business requirements, and then do our best to collect the demand around it to maximize revenue, to maximize performance, and to make sure it's a good user experience.
And just going back to reality right now, not all publishers use Telaria's technology exclusively. In a world where all publishers are using either Google, Freewheel in combination with Telaria, how would you solve for these issues? Because some of the problem is that your system is not aware of what other ads have been served by the actual ad server like Freewheel or Google. Are there any kind of discussions about at least communicating that information to the ad server and retrieving certain things from them, or no?
Yeah, definitely. So, so there's a lot of lists of advertisers and brands that cannot be shown that is being communicated back and forth. So, when it's RTB, it's a big list of blocked A domains. When it's vast, when we get a call, very often a publisher will say, for legacy reasons, they have another ad server, and they say, hey, I already delivered this particular advertiser. I have 2 more slots. Make sure that they all fit together, don't show that advertiser again, and maybe don't show that category again. And at the same time, sometimes we will call the ad server and say, hey, we've already shown these advertisers. Please don't show them or anyone like them. So there's a lot of passing back and forth. Last year, we launched our own ad server. We've focused on programmatic video for the first few years because it's really the harder problem. Once we felt we captured those business rules, we also launched our own ad server so that you can make a nice clean pod. But in many cases, that's not what works for the publisher. They have demand in a different ad server. They want to work with other exchanges, SSPs, other ad servers. And so there's just lots of communication back and forth of, hey, here's the context that you need to deliver that ad for.
Thank you. Maybe we can talk a little bit about also in the same theme about help basically serve the right ad to the same audience through the use of data, right? We didn't talk much this morning about like the actual data that is used to target the right household. At Roku, we do offer our publishers to use our audience segments to hopefully embed like the ad targeting experience. Tim, can you tell us a little bit what Sony does or how in the actual sales life cycle when you pitch your inventory to agencies, to buyers, does that topic comes up? Do you prefer to use the data from your side, or do you rely on the advertisers' data and you let them basically target and pick from there, and who should they serve the ad to?
We'll use data however our brands want to buy it. Mm-hmm. So if you look at our legacy, and again, from Sony Pictures' vantage point, our services are Sony Crackle, which was one of the early AVOD services, PlayStation View, which is a virtual MVPD, and Funimation, an animation studio. So just as a backdrop, our legacy business, I'm here to help transition it. A lot of it's direct IO. We've just onboarded Nielsen Marketing Cloud as a DMP, and Mark's former company, if he's still in the room, they have a variety of segments, and at this point in time within the digital video marketplace, they're a big player, and they give us JD Power, they give us all the segments that we would need. We're currently working with folks like Craig in terms of how do we enable these datas and create targeted deals in the programmatic space. Our challenge really is as there's programmatic mandates, not necessarily just because it's the best way to do it, it is, but as we lay the foundation, I think it's really for our brand partners to really navigate how much fragmentation, not only amongst players like ourselves, PlayStation View, a channel like Cheddar on PlayStation View, but also the flip side is how do we as the publisher capture a much more diverse amount of brands and partnering with local resellers like Tegna's. And my point is, and I'll come back to data in a second, my point is, as we can attract a more diverse, a wider breadth of demand, will take care of some of those frequency issues at this point in time, as well as ad serving that'll inform us. Coming back to data, so we talked about programmatic. We're seeing a lot of the data coming through the demand-side platform. So we'll talk about the trade desk. I don't want to offend other DSPs in the room, but the trade desk to me has become the gold standard for a device graph. And 12 to 18 months ago, targeting connected TV, OTT, was you kind of threw your hands in the air and you sprayed and prayed, or you'd get a segment and a match. You know, the trade desk has done a very good job. There's been some other, you know, Adobe's Data Zoos, et cetera, that do that well. When we're asked to target segments and really go forth with an addressable segment, because we can do it, the irony is they're doing it with NVIDIA on linear TV, and we're still struggling somewhat to standardizing it with online video. But we are starting to work with our SSP partners to layer in data on the publisher end. And again, this creates a more target-rich buy. I can get more yield out of it in a perfect world because it's more valuable, but we're kind of at this where it's just becoming, I don't want to say standard, but it's becoming more normal to buy off DSP data. And you know, as that switch, as more brands start to realize that Sony Crackle has heavy amount of Gen Z buyers, we can apply that data and start creating addressable DLIDs. Mm-hmm. The last point on data is there's the data parameters of our products. So there's not only kind of the demo, the in-market for an auto, but how can we pass data from the ad call, which is a whole separate session here, but how do we pass that data and give our product people comfort that the DSP is not mining my data and going to reverse engineer my audience and buy around me? And I think that's a little far-fetched, but that's one of my internal battles right now. But how do we now better pass data so that we can do more sophisticated targeting and measuring, et cetera?
Definitely a valid point, for sure. I want to go back to Lexie and make sure that you have enough time to talk about this workflow, and maybe if you can tell us, you mentioned like the basic functionality of an SSII provider, Brightcove, obviously one of the biggest platform in that. Are you thinking about other features that you can bring in towards your technology to help solve some of these challenges, whether it's like the frequency capping or maybe the understanding who is the end user seeing that ad and trying to customize maybe the ad experience to a certain extent?
Yeah, so first to speak to this diagram, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's very complicated and there's a lot of parties involved, and it's not just Brightcove performing this. So first it's going to start with Sony sending us the content stream in the form of a manifest, or even Roku sending on behalf of Sony, and that manifest will contain both the content and cue points of when those ad breaks will occur. In an on-demand scenario, that'll be the form of a VMAP template, and then in a live scenario, it'll be like a SCUDdy marker. Then once we have this manifest with the cue points of when the ad break should occur, and we have the content, we segment it out, and then we actually transcode the ad creative. I'm getting ahead of myself. So sorry, I know, I got excited. So then we do a VAS call to the SSP. So we'll say Telaria in this case. Telaria will then go to a DSP. We used the trade desk as the example through an OpenRTB call. Trade desk will go to their ad server or pick the best creative based on the campaigns they have running. Then they'll come back to us. We'll take that ad creative, and something that we do to improve that user experience is we transcode every ad creative we can, or the first time we see it, and that ensures the highest quality and that the quality is consistent with the content. So that leads to cool things like Mark was mentioning previously, like audio normalization, making sure that the audio matches the content and making sure that it's just as high of quality depending on screen size, where it's delivering, and that's especially important in an OTT environment. So that's something Brightcove does. And then finally, once we stitch all the content and the ads together, we deliver it back to the video player, probably Roku in this case. So that's the
Always
flow.
Roku.
Always Roku. Always Roku. And then your second question of what Brightcove does to, or the technology we're implementing to make sure that we're delivering it to the user in the best way possible. Obviously, there's entire companies that do the ad decisioning and this logic to make sure pods are being filled in the most efficient way possible. However, I do see the SSAI vendor having more of an integral role in pod optimization and ensuring you're serving as minimal slate and house ads as possible. I think it's our role to be able to key off of these things like that are being passed, like frequency capping, priority, who the audience is, and being able to fill that pod efficiently. So I think that's a role that the SSAI vendor should take.
Cool. We have only a few minutes left. I want to give Craig one last second maybe to talk a little bit about the work that the IAB have been doing with the IFA and how that you guys implemented it in serving basically OTT impressions.
Yeah, so one of the big challenges here is how do you actually identify the viewer? When we first started going into the CTV world, there were some platforms which had a cookie, other ones had an identifier, other ones didn't have anything, or including a user agent. So you'd have to use IP address or some kind of guess. So it's a big challenge in to figure out exactly who are you delivering to. So the IAB recently, I think formally, maybe even today, put it out an IFA for connected television and said this is the way you need to do that. It's very similar to what we saw in mobile, and that'll make things a lot easier because it's also more privacy friendly, and it's something that is connected with a device. But what's interesting is this is still very early. Like that's great. It's connected with a device, but there isn't always a one-to-one match between device and person. Right? When you're on a phone, a device is a person. They're watching it. If there's 3 people sitting on the couch watching Roku, that is lost on if you think that device ID is just one person. So there is, again, going back to what I said earlier, there's value in TV, in that experience, in that household, that we have to make sure that we not only apply what we do digitally to that world, but we also don't lose any of that extra great stuff about television. So yes, between that and VAST 4.1 allowing viewability, I think we really have sort of the tool set to start communicating between all of these different platforms to communicate the opportunity to the advertiser and make sure that the publisher really is able to monetize what is the best advertising medium that's out there.
Cool. Thank you so much to our panelists. Do we have a second for questions or we don't? We do? Cool. Do you guys have any questions for the folks? Please.
Hi, everyone. Do we have a mic? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Simon Applebaum with Tomorrow Will Be Televised, the promo about television on Blog Talk Radio and iHeartRadio, and also with Media Village, the media commentary website. A growing number of these smart TV sets and smart devices now have artificial intelligence voice capabilities, so people can use Google Assistant, Alexa, and Siri and talk to their television set or their smart TV device like a Roku and Amazon Fire TV to control what they want to do, whether it's to get an Uber ride or change the direction of a show. And Timothy, I'll start with you on this because Sony Crackle, of course, is a smart TV distributed service. How do you think artificial intelligence is going to play in this whole area of addressing all these issues?
I think it comes down to discoverability, and for us, it's hugely important. In a separate related, we just launched a game with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire within Amazon, and you can literally talk to it. It's very cool, but Youssef is obviously intimately familiar with Roku, so partnering with platforms, we stand to benefit because we have a huge catalog of Hollywood studio-produced films, Big Lebowski this month, if you're on Sony Crackle, and again, as more traditional, more well-known catalogs, Seinfeld, start to get requested, we like it. We're all in, and as a consumer, we're all in. But Youssef, maybe, well, you can defer your question.
I cannot talk to the press today. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry. So in the server-side world, how do you...
Hold your question. Let me get with the mic. Otherwise, no one can hear you.
Thank you. So in the server-side world, how do you deal with interactive ads, VPaid ads, or interactive ads?
I'm so glad you asked that. I was going to come back to your question with interactivity. Just to plug the IAB releasing VAST 4.1. How exciting. Interactivity is going to be huge, and being able to do this through VAST rather than VPaid, breaking out that, breaking the spec into both, I don't know, but interactivity basically through the VAST 4.01 call will be huge. It'll help us be able to do things. Like we already have clickability, which will be great, being able to click on an ad, which can be really cool if you think about Hulu's ad selector, like Mark was mentioning before, being able to accomplish things like that on an OTT device, choosing your ad experience. So it's coming. So with 4.1 adoption, I'm positively optimistic.
Cool. Anything else? Yes, please, in the white shirt.
Hold on.
So VAST 4.1 seems like something that everyone's very excited about, but thinks is going to be a long ways away. What can we do to help accelerate the adoption of VAST 4.1? And I guess in this ecosystem, like which party might be best to accelerate that adoption?
I can say from platform perspective, we work very closely with our publishers. So every time they develop an app or they release it, we do have extensive discussions with their dev team on both the actual app as well as the advertising experience. I personally work very closely with folks like Craig and other platforms to understand their needs and how fast they can adopt things. And if everyone is on board with VAST 4.1, we definitely make a very strong recommendation to publishers to adopt it. And then I imagine, like from the buy side, same thing. DSPs are willing probably to adopt the tech as fast as it's practical for them, right?
Yeah, and if I could add, I mean, the thing that I'm excited about it, I do expect it to be a much faster adoption than 4.0 was because of the piece where they take viewability and say, all right, here's a slot for it. You can put in your code where it'll execute safely. So VPaid was great. You can put viewability code in there, but you could also put a lot of other stuff. So publishers are very nervous about letting that run for user experience, if nothing else. It could slow down the ad. With 4.1, it's in a nice isolated area where the viewability code goes. So I think that will open up a lot of spend, especially for advertisers who are trying to buy across different devices. They can still use the same vendor. So I expect it'll be a much faster adoption, and there's really not much to hold back. We already support it.
Yeah, and I just want to put in a plug for everyone to the right of me on publisher on that last diagram needs to support it. I need to make sure that like DFP and Freewheel, everyone in the room is supporting 4.1. You can pass it and it all, the daisy chain, because then I have to have the argument that, hey, 4.1 needs to be on a roadmap. Like, well, Freewheel's not supporting it. I'm like, they're not? And so we need all to get on board.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. Round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.